Shalom, everybody. Just wanted to make a video just kind of talking about who I am if you're going to follow my page and the John 17 initiative. And I've made some other little, videos that some of you may have watched or seen, but my plan is to get more involved in doing a lot of the teachings that I've done in the past at the International House of Prayer at Eastern Gate and some other places throughout my life that I've done some specific teachings on Israel and the connection to the church and the Jewish people, prophecy, promise of the Messiah, how he's the seed. But I just wanted to kind of, just talk a little bit about myself, kind of give a testimony so that as you're watching, you kind of know who I am, know my heart. So as I always like to start my testimony is I was born and partially raised in New Albany, Indiana. My family moved to New Jersey when I was about 3 years old. My father, who is Jewish, my mother is not Jewish. So I've always kind of told people that in my life, in my actual person, is the idea of the one new man. And the one new man being Jew and Gentile, worshiping the Messiah, coming under the headship of Yeshua the Messiah, being joined together in unity and love under the Yeshua the Messiah, Jewish believers and Gentile believers, as Paul talks about, the one new man. And I believe that is in me, as my mother is a believer, my dad, Jewish, is a believer, and they married, and I am the fruit of that labor, of that marriage. The one new man inside of me, living inside of me literally, is my Jewish heritage and a beautiful Gentile heritage that the Lord has joined together in just such a beautiful way through my belief in the Messiah, Yeshua, excuse me. And so from there, being in Jersey and, growing up, I grew up in the Assemblies of God church denomination, charismatic, Pentecostal. So that's kind of my church background. Was raised in that, grew up in that, and until about the time I was about 20 when I decided to go to college. Yeah, I decided to go to college a little late. I then began around that time, around the age of about 19 or 20, the Lord started to speak to me and say, I want you to understand more of your Jewish heritage, right? And it's not like I didn't know that I wasn't Jewish, that I was Jewish growing up. It was that, growing up in a Gentile world in Christianity, there wasn't a lot of connection I had outside of, we would go to my grandma's house to do Passover and Hanukkah, and we would have, and I understood those holidays, so I would celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah and Passover and Easter. And the one strange one to me that I always grew up celebrating that I never understood as a kid was when we would do Yom Kippur with the break fast. So I didn't really understand Yom Kippur at all. All I knew is that we went to my grandma's house and we broke the fast. And whenever I would hear break the fast, I would think breakfast. I'm like, why are we having breakfast again, in the evening? And my dad would be like, well, we're breaking the fast. And I'm like, what fast? We didn't fast at all. But we would go and just continue and do that tradition with my family. And most of the time it was, bagels and lox or some kinds of other fish, or, other times it might have been, the great other Jewish food and Chinese food. I had all those in my background. So I always knew. My dad in church would always wear a kippah, sometimes on Sunday mornings, or if they would ask him to teach, he would wear a talit. So I always knew I was Jewish, but I never had the connection really to that. I know there were times in my life that I thought, well, I wish I wasn't really Jewish anymore. I just wish I was, Gentile. I wish I was a Christian because of just some of the ways that, Israel was taught, and Judaism sometimes was taught, and how God was kind of, in a sense, done with Israel, though he wasn't done with Israel, and yet he would still do something in Israel. Growing up, hearing some, teach, oh, well, God was always angry with the Jewish people throughout the Old Testament, but, it's okay now because Jesus came, and just a lot of some of those teachings just disconnected me a lot from my Jewish roots and my Jewish heritage. And, I think, I'm not angry. At one point, I was angry at that background stuff, at some of the things that I encountered with all that. When I began to understand my Jewishness more, there was a frustration in my heart towards all that. But, the Lord showed me that really what mattered is my faith in Him, and that no matter how I felt about my heritage or my background in those times of feeling like I was less than for being Jewish, kind of, He showed me and He carried me through all that, and brought me to a place where, like as I was saying, when I was in my 20 years old, He began to say, David, I want you to understand who you are as a Jewish man. And I had no idea really what that meant besides Passover, Hanukkah, things like that. I mean, some connections I had. My dad used to listen to Lamb a lot, a Messianic Jewish singing group from the 60s and 70s, who are really great. I knew they were singing in Hebrew and stuff. It didn't really make a mental connection with me back then. But like I said, the Lord started to say, I want you to understand this. And, I struggled with that. Like, I don't even know how to do that. I'm in a Pentecostal Assemblies of God church, contemplating going to college, not sure what to do. And, here in the midst of all this, God is saying, I want you to understand who you are as a Jew. And so I just really started asking the Lord, how do I do that? I remember talking to my friend Brian Yannick and emailing him like, I feel the Lord calling me to, understand more of my Jewish heritage. And, he was, supportive and was like, hey, yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't know what that means either, like, just don't go like all like Orthodox. I was like, no, I'm not going to go Orthodox, So I, in my prayers, the first thing the Lord said to me was, find out what your last name means. And my last name is Cohen. And I didn't know what that meant, except that me and my family, we had a Jewish last name. And so, excuse me again. And so, I knew I went to my dad and I asked, because I if anybody knows this, I know my dad is going to know what my last name means, what our last name meant. And so I went to him, I was like, Dad, I have a question. What does our last name mean? What does Cohen mean? Because the Lord had asked me to find out what that meant. And my dad, big smile, as he does, here he is now, he's going to be, a Jewish father giving his son a nice, Hebrew lesson about our last name. And, he said, our name is Cohen. It means priest, Kohen. And it means that we're from the tribe of Levi, connected to the house of Aaron. And I was like, whoa, connected to, in that sense, the temple service and the tabernacle service, and being part of the priesthood, took me back. I was like, wow, like out of all the tribes of Israel, I actually know what tribe I'm from. It's like when I read the prophecies now about what's coming in the priesthood, though Yeshua is our high priest, it still says that the priests will serve in the temple with him, or in that capacity. So I'm like, well, I know what I'm going to be doing in the millennial kingdom. I have that calling. I was born into it. There's nothing I can do to change that or anything like that. And the fact that I believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, and that he came and fulfilled all the prophecies, and that he is the great high priest, just confirms more of my calling. And it's not so much that I think that makes me better than anybody, that I know my tribal lineage, or that I know, kind of have an idea of what I'll be doing in the millennial kingdom. It doesn't make me better than anybody. I think I'm less than everybody else. I think I'm, I never think of myself more than anyone. But that was the first steps. So the next thing my dad had some books by Dan Juster, and one of them was Jewish Roots. And so I started reading it, and it was really interesting, but it's not what I needed. And this was what I learned was what I needed was experience, not just knowledge. I needed the experience. And I didn't know how to get that. And so, my parents pushed me to go to Valley Forge Christian College. I didn't really want to. That was one thing I didn't want to do. It's now Valley Forge University. I did not want to go at all. I actually, when I was filling out my application to go to Valley Forge, I actually withheld part of it on purpose, so that I couldn't get fully where they would accept for the acceptance. And so I sent in half of my application and withheld the other half on purpose. And so, they kept calling, we need your other half so that you can, we can start getting your processing and everything done. And I was like, I don't want to. So finally, there came a point where I was like, all right, me and some of my friends, Brian and a couple others who were going to go to Valley Forge, we went to an event they had that was called Breakaway. And Breakaway was a weekend, like a Friday and Saturday, Friday night, Saturday, and you would sleep away there, but you would get to participate in classes and you'd get to go to all the events, and you would learn about the college. And so my mom sent me with that second half that I had never finished. And so I was like, fine. So I went to the registrar's office to hand it in. And, I didn't tell them I was coming. I said nothing. And I just went in with my form. My name wasn't on it or anything. Everything was inside. And I handed to her, the lady behind the desk. And she's like, oh, you're David Cohen. We've been waiting for you. I was like, how did you know it was me? And how did you know? And then this look of shock shook her face. She was like, oh my goodness. And she had a prophetic word from the Lord in that moment that it was me, that I was handing in everything. And I knew in that moment that no matter what I felt, no matter what I wanted, I knew I was going to be accepted into Valley Forge Christian College at that time. So obviously I was accepted literally like a few days later. I got a phone call, you're accepted, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to college. So in the midst of all that, I kind of want to backtrack a moment because it'll bring it more to this point of the learning of my Jewish roots and how college and different things. But I want to mention real quick my salvation experience. So I grew up in the church, but I didn't get saved till I was about 13. I knew everything. It's not like I was super rebellious or anything like that. Like I went to church. I went to youth group. I did in the Assemblies of God. They had a boys organization called Royal Rangers, which was like a Christian Boy Scouts that I loved. Went camping, went to all those things, but I never really officially gave my life to the Lord, even though I knew everything. And so in fourth grade, sorry, my parents decided that they were going to homeschool us. And so I was homeschooled from fourth grade all the way through high school, which was a great experience for me personally. A lot of people said, oh, it's, you must, have struggled in college. No, my first, 2 years of college, I was on the dean's list. I had no problems writing papers and doing all that. I felt like I had a normal life. Like people were like, oh, well, what about friends? I had friends at church. I had friends in my neighborhood. I had friends everywhere. Like I was a social I was a social butterfly. So I really had no problems with making friends and, being with other people. Like I was fine in my life, but I remember at that time, science was my favorite subject. And I loved learning about the clouds. I loved learning about the stars. I loved learning about the natural sciences, how everything worked, how, if you get in real close on a leaf and put it under a microscope and you see like veins and all those different things and how those things worked. And, I loved the clouds. At one point I knew I could pick out a cloud and be like, it was a cirrus cloud, cumulonimbus and all that. And at that point I had my pop-pops, my grandfather's binoculars, and I used to go outside and I used to just look at the clouds because I thought they were just beautiful and amazing. And I remember always praying, Lord, if you're real and things in your Bible are real, things that I'm reading are real, I want to know. Like I need to know. I need like a real not just knowing it in my mind. Like, I need to know you're real. Like, if you could show yourself to me or see you or something, to know that everything I'm reading is real. I want, because I was going through different things when I was 12 and 13, going, is the things in the Bible true? Did the disciples really see you resurrected? Did they lie about it? Was your body actually stolen from the tomb, or did you rise from the dead? Like, all these things are important because, if you really did rise from the dead and the Bible's true, I really need to believe that. But if it was stolen, like, it's a worthless thing, if you didn't rise from the dead. And even Paul says that, if Jesus, Yeshua, didn't rise from the dead, all of our faith is pointless. It's all pointless if he didn't actually resurrect. The resurrection secures that our faith is true, and that the Bible is true, and that he is faithful, and that he's real, and that he's on the throne. And so I remember one day I was outside. It was I want to say it was springtime, because I remember it was a little cooler outside. I was wearing a jacket, and I was outside looking at the clouds, and I was looking up, and I was just amazed because there were these big, like, white puffy clouds with this blue-black background. And I was, through my binoculars, and I heard a voice. And this is a story that I don't like to tell. Well, I stopped telling it because so many people never believed me. And I had people tell me I was crazy, that it wasn't real. And, so I don't tell the story very often. Sometimes I feel like it's personal, just between me and the Lord. But I'm going to share this. And so I heard a voice, and I knew it was a voice, and said, "Hey, David, over here." And, as soon as I heard it, my whole body turned, binoculars still up, and I turned and looked. And there was Yeshua, Jesus himself, standing in the cloud. He was standing there. I saw him. He was holding out his arms. You can't really see me, but he was holding out his arms like he was going to give a hug. And his wrists, I saw the holes that were pierced. I saw them. I saw his face. His face is big, like toothy grin, not like mine where my teeth are all crooked, but his, smile. I saw his teeth and his hair, and he was wearing a white robe, and he had a sash, and it was just beautiful, and he was just smiling at me. No other words. I heard nothing else, and I was just looking at him, and I looked into his eyes, and they pierced through me, and I literally, to this day, can never forget that feeling, is that I felt like pure glass. And I said, "Oh, you see all my sin," but he didn't see my sin. All he saw was me clear. Like, there was no stains on me. I was clear and I was clean, and he was looking at me, and he loved me in spite of all my sin and everything I had done. He just didn't see it. He only saw me, and his love just made me feel pure and clean and holy before him. And I knew that everything I had asked, I was asking, let me know that you're real. I want to see that you're real. I need to know you're real. Not just from reading the scriptures or whatever that I'm, I want, obviously Jesus said, blessed are those who have not seen, but he also said, I will reveal those to the Father, reveal myself to those who really are earnestly seeking after me. And I just feel like he did that for me. I still don't know what that means for me, because most became apostles. I'm not an apostle, I don't think. But I've seen him, and I saw him, and there's times I try to remember that moment, and I can't remember it at all. I can't even remember his features. And then there's times I talk about it, and I close my eyes, and man, I can see it as if it just happened to me. And I feel that love again in the midst of all my struggles that I've had, of times of even doubting his love for me, doubting that he has a call for me, doubting because of words spoken over me that I'm not going to get into in this video at all. So that even though I saw him then, I didn't get saved then, I guess I could say. Like, I knew he was real, but I'd actually held off in fully believing in him, if that's not like crazy and amazing in and of itself, that I waited until the fall. And in the fall, in the youth group I was at, we went to a youth convention. And the youth convention and the Assemblies of God in our district that I was in always happened like the week before Thanksgiving. So it was exciting because it was my first youth convention. I had waited and was so excited to go to one, and I went. The worship was powerful. The teachings were powerful. And I just felt the Spirit of the Lord so heavy, and I just said, yep. And I remember going up to the front, and just in that moment of 13 years old, in the fall, I was born in January, is my birthday. So, I'm getting towards being, 14. And just in that sense, just remember that feeling of feeling everything lift off me when I gave my heart to God. And so from that moment on, when I was 13, I've been following the Lord, been a believer. A lot of struggles and trials in the midst of that, just like everybody else feels and knows. Had a lot of different things go on in my life, just different sins and can't think of the word right now, sorry. And temptations and different things that I dealt with, pornography being one of them that the Lord freed me from. And now, just blessed to know that I'm free from all that. So like now coming back with that vision, in college, I still didn't want to be there. So I remember my first day in college, I'm in my room. I have a corner room. The building was building 24, and 24 was considered like this. If you were there, man, you were really strong, not just in the Lord, but I'm talking like strong person, because most of the time the heat didn't work. This is a building from back during World War II. The heat didn't work. It didn't have air conditioning. So in the winter, it was freezing. Like when I say freezing, I mean it was colder. It was like living in an ice box. It was cold. And then in the summer, you had no air conditioning. So it was like living in a hot box. So this was like really, you were tested living in building 24. And I was in 24 up. That's where I wanted to be. I knew that was the building, even though I knew no air conditioning, no heat in the winter time. But I knew that the guys that were on that floor were just really solid with the Lord. And so my first roommate was my buddy Brian, and we went at the same time, and neither one of us, I remember, like, what are we doing here? I remember we were in a shared room, and it was like I had my side and he had his side, but there was like a door that connected our rooms. And I remember we were just both laying there going, what are we doing here? I don't want to be here. And he had already done, basically finished college with, local college, I can't think of the word. Sometimes my brain farts, just so you know. So forgive me for that. But he basically finished, and there I was. I'm just starting, I'm 20, and I'm going, God, I don't want to be here. I just want to go home. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I was ready to leave in that moment, and we're there, and I'm standing there, and in the room I had was on a corner, and it was just almost all windows, which made it even worse during the winter and summer, because it was just all windows, right? But it was also cool because I had a great view on the second floor of Valley Forge over there. Is just a beautiful area. And I remember looking out my window, and again, there's big puffy clouds, and they're beautiful, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, God, why did you send me here? I don't want to be here. I feel like I'm here, and I feel like, man, I'd just rather be home. I don't want to do this. I mean, it's what I was feeling. I didn't want to be there. And I remember hearing from the Lord, again, a voice in my spirit so strong. It said, David. And I look up, and I'm looking out my window towards a field where there's like no trees or anything, and there's clouds and everything there, and the sun is there. It's all bright. And in my mind's eye, I see Yeshua on the throne and everything happening around him. Like he's on his throne, and he's looking at me, and he goes, I brought you here for a reason. You may not like it, but there is more for you here than just your education. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, it wasn't like I was like jumping around praising the Lord. I'm seeing him on his throne. It was, I am going to submit to this, even though I don't want to. I don't want to submit to this, but okay, Lord, I will be here. I will stay here. I will do this, but I have a condition. If you really want me to be here, and you want me to stay here, Lord, I want you to make sure I have a 4.0 GPA in my first, year here. And I kind of felt him laugh. But I was serious. I was like, if I don't have a 4.0 GPA, well, I'm here. I'm leaving. I'm leaving because, I don't want to be here. You got to prove this out. I wasn't sure how I would do, obviously in college, but, that's how I felt. I mean, it was serious. I was serious, 4.0. And so I see him again on the throne, and this is more of like a vision kind of thing. And I see him, and the throne is there, and there's angels, and there's, all this light and glory around him. And, he says, I have you here for a reason that's greater than your education. And so what was the Lord talking to me about before this? Learn about your Jewish roots. And what did I need? Experience. Guess what? It turns out I meet a young man there, who's also there. His name was Juan. He might watch this. I don't know. Juan, hi. And he sees me. He sees the face, right? This is a Jewish face. You can't mistake it, right? I've had people say, oh, you have the map of Israel and Jerusalem is right there on your nose. Can't, escape the fact that I look, Jewish and everything. And I know I am. He's like, oh, you're Jewish. Oh, brother, come to my bosom. He's like this, he's Gentile, but he loves the Jewish people. And he goes, and we start talking, and he goes, oh, there's someone I want you to meet. And, okay. And so he takes me, and guess what? This young man that he wants me to meet is on my floor in 24. He's on my floor. Never met him before. We go just 3 or 4 doors down the hall. And here's this young man, blonde hair, young, his face is bright, he's so full of the Lord. And I remember him looking like this. His face is ruddy, kind of like King David is described. And, I sit down with him. Oh, hello, how are you? And I tell him my name. And he goes, oh, so you're Jewish. Yeah, I'm Jewish. I'm here. He's like, oh. And then he starts telling me all about Messianic Judaism and the history of Messianic Judaism, which I have never heard before in my life. This is never, ever, I've never heard of Messianic Judaism, ever. I didn't even know this was something. In my mind, my dad and me and my family, my close, my sisters and everything, we're the few Jewish believers in the world, we're like one of a kind, especially how my dad was treated in the church, oh, we have a Jewish believer here, look at us, we have our trophy, we have a Jew here who's a believer. And so my belief was that there weren't many of us. And then I'm sitting here talking to him, and then he starts talking to me about a conference called the Messiah Conference that's held every year at Messiah University that had just happened in July, and now here we are, end of August, and he had just been there, a month ago, and he's telling me about Messiah Conference, about 2,000 Jewish believers who gather together, once a week, for that week out of the year. He starts telling me about the Messianic synagogues, and he goes, oh, I go to a Messianic synagogue. And he goes, I'm not Jewish, though. I'm Gentile. I was raised, I'm Jewish, but I was raised in the Messianic Jewish community. And here I am, a Jew, raised in the Gentile Christian community. And then we meet, and it's like this radical, crazy idea that a Jewish believer raised in the church is meeting a Gentile who's raised in the Messianic Jewish community. And then, here we are coming together in the same room, in the same dorm, just a few doors down from each other. Only the Lord could put that together. And, his name is Martin Crowley, still a great friend and brother of mine. I'll never forget going to Beth Yeshua the first time in Philadelphia. And we went, and this was the experience I was looking for. It wasn't anything. Hi, Aurora. That's my cat, Aurora, my little girl. And I'll just never forget that moment, seeing the dancing and hearing the worship and just everything that was happening. I was like, yes! This is what and the Lord reminded me, and I felt him standing beside me, and he said, remember what I told you. I have more for you here than just your education. And this was it. So he started beforehand, just months beforehand. I want you to learn who you are as a Jew. Learn your heritage. Who are you? What is your identity? I want you to know your identity. Don't worry, I have it all planned out for you. You don't even know it. You're asking me, how do I do this? I already have it set up for you. I already have it set up that you're going to go to college. You're not going to want to go, but I'm going to have 2 young men that you're going to meet your first days there who are both Gentile, connected to the Messianic Jewish community, who are going to speak with you, and they're going to bring you into this calling that I have for you. I already have it set up. It's okay. And that's something that me and my buddy Martin, my brother Martin, we talk about, whenever we see each other. You remember when we met at college and you sat down and he started playing Paul Wilbur, and man, I started crying. He's playing Paul Wilbur, and, Shalom Jerusalem, and the violins are playing, and there's worship, and we're here in Israel and Jerusalem, and we're worshiping the Lord, and he's there, and he's telling me about Messiah, and we just start weeping together. I'll never forget the power of that moment. And so from that time, the Lord just really has had me in that place. From that point on in college, going to Beth Yeshua, I was in Beth Yeshua, attended their Messianic Judaism for the next 10 to 12 years of my life. I met my wife through the Messianic movement. She's has a little bit of Jewish blood in her. A Gentile, great, wonderful believer, wonderful woman of God, Jennifer. We have a son, 13, just turned 13. We gave him his talit and yarmulke. Didn't have a bar mitzvah for him because we're still getting plugged into congregations, and just I wasn't bar mitzvahed myself, so it's okay. But just the reality of everything is just amazing to me. Encountering Messianic Judaism and the Lord bringing me through to all of that. And then when I went to my first Messiah conference is when I got it was either the first or second Messiah conference. I can't remember when he spoke, but Coach Raleigh Washington spoke at Messiah conference, and him and his wife were up there, and he spoke on John 17. And this is where the whole John 17 initiative for me comes from. And it was the first time I ever heard the last part of John 17. Yeshua, first in John 17, he prays for himself, and then he prays for his disciples, and then he prays for all believers. And when he prays for all believers in John 17, in those last couple of verses, he literally says, I pray for not only these, my Jewish people, my Jewish believers, my disciples, the Jewish believers, but also for those who would believe in me through their word. And that those are the Gentile believers. So Yeshua's final prayer is for the one new man prophetically, that these, the Jewish believers, the apostles, and who would go out into the nations, who would save those Gentiles, that we would be one. And that's echad. The word is echad, for one. And Yeshua was praying that we would be echad, one, just as he and the Father are one, echad. And that's even, echad is where it comes from the Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Echad is not just one, singular, but it's a singular plural. And that's what Yeshua wants from us as Jewish and Gentile believers, to be echad, one. Not where, there's a replacement theology, supersessionist idea that we're better than Israel, and Israel, no longer matters, and just God no longer has any desire for the Jewish people. There might be Jewish people being saved. No, God still loves Israel. He still loves the Jewish people. His promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were made from him, by him, for them. There is nothing that Abraham and his descendants could do to ever break the Abrahamic covenant. The Mosaic covenant was given as if you do this, good will happen. If you do this, bad will happen. And the bad would be, I will remove you from the promise of the Abrahamic covenant for a period of time until you repent, and then I will bring you back to the land. This happened the first time with Babylon and with the 70 years. They were removed. They went into exile. After 70 years, God said, I'm going to bring you back to the promised land. Why? Because I promised this land to you and your descendants. Whether you're faithful or not, that promise is for you. So he brought them back. And at first, they were very faithful. Nehemiah, Ezra, they rebuilt the temple. They rebuilt, Jerusalem, the city. But even during that time, the people were more concerned with building their homes than building the house of the Lord. So even then, they weren't fully faithful. And yet God still says, even though you're not fully faithful, I'm still giving you this promise because I am faithful. And so Israel, rebuilds. They live in the land. They're there for, another, several hundred years until we get to, even, Rome, when Jesus comes and everything towards the end of, the end of the BC periods and into the AD. And then we know that the unfaithfulness and the rejection of Yeshua brings about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. The destruction of the temple in 70 AD wasn't the diaspora part, right? The temple is destroyed, things happened, but the Jewish people remained in the land of Israel for another almost 100 years. And they weren't fully dispersed until the Bar Kokhba revolt, which I won't really get into. You can look up for yourself the Bar Kokhba revolt and what happened. And then around the 200s AD is when Rome finally said, we're not dealing with this anymore. And they dispersed them. And there's a whole history that winds up happening. They wind up in that time renaming the land Palestine. So Jesus wasn't a Palestinian. He was an Israeli, because he couldn't have been a Palestinian because the name wasn't changed to Palestine until after 200 AD. But I'm not going to get into any of that. I'm not going to get into that because this is just about my testimony, my heart. So just with all that being said, my heart is that John 17 initiative. John 17, that the these and those will be one. And just looking at the prophetic, Paul talks about the mystery, and the mystery is how the Gentiles have been saved and brought into the community of Israel and being part of Israel and being part of the promises of God and being brought in. He says, you who were once far off, Gentiles, you who were once separate from God, once you were separate from the promises, you were separate from the covenants, you were separate from everything. And then Yeshua comes, and then he brings you into all these things. He brings you into the covenants of Israel. He brings you into the promises of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He brings you into this so that we can be connected in one, because it's God's way of bringing humanity back into perfect creation, where the day will come in the age to come, the new heavens and the new earth, where truly the idea of Jew and Gentile will then no longer matter, and we will truly then be humanity as we were meant to be with Adam and Eve. Before Adam and Eve sinned, the goal, I don't believe there was ever going to be separations and distinctions of peoples. And we were all going to be one humanity under God. But our sin caused, in this world that we live in this age, this present evil age, separations. And in those separations, God said, out of all the separations of man and languages, I need to bring up a nation that will speak forth who I am, who will carry my name into the earth. And he chose Abraham because of his righteousness. And the Jewish people, not because of our righteousness, because our people have never really been righteous according to the faith of Abraham. Yet because of the promises to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And, Isaac and Jacob, they weren't nearly as faithful as close to Abraham, their father. Yet God still promises and says, through your seed, I will bless the earth. And that word seed, this is the final thing I guess I'll say. That word seed is both like echad, both singular and plural. So this is why Paul says it's not through seeds that salvation will come through the earth, but one. But the one will come through the seeds. Right? Paul wasn't saying that the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the descendants of Israel and the Jewish people would no longer matter in that sense. But he was making an understanding that it was a singular seed promised to Abraham, yes, in the midst of all the seeds promised to Abraham, that one seed would be the one to bring restoration. That does not negate the other seeds, the descendants. So there's a singular seed throughout history, but there's also specific seeds, descendants, through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that were promised specific blessings because of the one seed. And the Gentiles, because of the one seed, would come and be a part of the other seeds through faith. And I just want to, say bless you all. I know this might have been a little bit of a long testimony. I hope it blesses you. But But this is the beginning. I'm going to start, my next videos will be some of my teachings that I want to get out there. I really don't have an access to, a community or a group or anything that I lead, and that's okay. Long story, it's just I haven't wanted to teach in a long time, but the Lord's really been putting a burden on my heart to do this. So if you join me, if you don't join me, it's okay. Do a like and subscribe if you like this. And if you think that this will bless somebody else, tell somebody else about it too. It's okay if you do or not. I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm not trying to have, 1 million followers or 1 million subscribers. I'm not trying to get any of the YouTube buttons or anything like that. I just want to bless those of you who will watch. I just want my testimony to get out there. And this is my teachings and the things that, and I say my teachings, but really it's Lord downloading his words and understanding of his word through me, just as other teachers. I don't want to be a peddler of the gospel or anything like that. I'm not a 501c3. I'm not any of those things. I'm not looking for people to send me money at all. If you have money that you want to send it to the Messianic Jewish Alliance of America. Don't send it to me. Send it to the Messianic Jewish Alliance of America. That's an organization that I work for that actually helps. We are helping to give aid and all kinds of aid that the Jewish people need, the poor and needy and those who are affected by October 7th and so on. We send food, clothing. We've helped with shelter. We're going to be part of a ministry over there in a group with Israel government, helping to rebuild homes in the south that were destroyed on October 7th once the peace fully sets, which I hope it fully sets. Scripturally says, peace, peace, they say when there is no peace, or they heal the wound of my people lightly by saying peace, peace when there is only destruction. So, but, truly, I believe the Messianic Jewish Alliance of America and the Joseph Project and what we're doing in Israel. Just look it up. Joseph Project, international.org, I think it is, MJAA.org. I'll actually put a link to the MJAA and the Joseph Project in my comment section of this video, getting all worded up. So I think I've gone long enough. Bless all of you. I hope this blesses you again. Shalom, shalom. And it's Friday night, so I say Shabbat shalom. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. May his countenance be upon you. And may, in the name of the Prince of Peace, may he make you his shalom and his peace be upon you. In Yeshua's name, bless you all. Amen. Bye-bye.